Good evening. So part of the idea here is also to shine the light on the smaller charities. And now this forum will enable families, particularly with the evening session, to bring their kids to the table and just show them what's going on. Nothing needs to be done. There's always the option to do. So I'm going to let both Tammy and James talk about their causes in 5 minutes or so. And we also want to know not only what you are doing, but how has COVID affected your entity, other than not being able to go out and fundraise the way you normally do. So let's do ladies first. Tammy, please, floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Elke, and thank you to Rubach Wealth for this opportunity. It's such a unique way to be able to present and to be engaged with a new audience. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity, especially on Giving Tuesday, and it feels like such a special day. So maybe I can just start, because often people don't even know about ALS. And so, for any one of us, we have a 1 in 300 chance in our lifetime of being given that diagnosis. And if you can imagine, maybe you're 45 and you simply start by dropping your hockey stick. Maybe your 20-year-old daughter suddenly starts tripping, or maybe your 80-year-old parent suddenly starts to have difficulty speaking. All of these are signs of ALS, and ALS is a progressive paralysis. So maybe for the remainder of my remarks, if you just want to sit as still as you possibly could, because if you had ALS and you were in an advanced state, you actually wouldn't be able to move your body. You wouldn't be able to move your hands to feed yourself. You might feel that fly would come into your hair, and you might not be able to scratch. You might be thirsty and you can't raise your drink. In fact, you might actually not even be able to swallow. You will start to lose your ability to speak. You will need to use eye gaze technology to communicate. And that's the very real reality of ALS. So my cousin Doug was 45 years old, and he was like my best friend. And he was the person that started by dropping his hockey stick. And eventually, Doug's progression was very similar to many people. And so within 5 years, Doug had gone from a very healthy 45-year-old that was running races and playing hockey and being this amazing salesperson to being unable to communicate, being unable to stand, being unable to care for himself, being unable to feed himself. And that is the reality of somebody living with ALS. So now imagine you've been given this terminal diagnosis, you've been told that you have 2 to 5 years to live, and that one of our regional managers is sitting right there beside you on the very day that you're given that diagnosis, and they're sitting in clinic, and you immediately feel that confidence of this person who has helped other people navigate this journey with their disease. And they have information available to you, they connect you with community resources so that you and your family and loved ones will understand the journey and will have the resources available. And you can appreciate that as you go through the progression, you might go from needing a walker to needing a simple wheelchair to needing a more complex chair. You're going to need a lift to get you from that chair and into your bed, maybe a hospital bed. And that equipment is actually provided by ALS Canada to be able to help you again on your journey, because our healthcare system, even as comprehensive as it is within Canada, doesn't provide that very basic mobility equipment that enables somebody to stay independently in their home or to keep their caregiver safe so they're not trying to lift their husband or their father. And so that's the work that our organization is doing on the ground within the province of Ontario. And then we're working in partnership with the other societies that are helping to fill that gap in their own healthcare system in their province. But ALS Canada gets our national title across the country. We have it play a leading role in access to therapies, and we are starting to finally see therapies come to market. So we're helping to engage with those companies early on so that they think of Canada when they're thinking about where to bring their drugs, when even they're considering clinical trials. And then when they're navigating that very complex system from drug approval through to reimbursement decisions. And ALS Canada is there doing that advocacy work and making sure that the patient voice is there to inform decision makers so that they understand the realities of ALS and hopefully they make different decisions. And ultimately, we also have a responsibility for the National Research Program. So ALS Canada has been working in this area for over 40 years, helping to make small seed investments in critical research so that our research community across the country can get those early discoveries, get that early detail and the information that they need so that they will be able to go on and get even larger research grants in the future. And ALS Canada and the ALS community nationally is playing a very big role internationally. And so, Michael, as you are here joining us from Germany, I started out my morning actually saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because our organization works internationally and we are actually hosting our international meetings. And so by doing that, we hopefully make sure that those collaborations are helping to learn from one another and to be able to build those relationships forward. And so ALS Canada is an entirely donor-funded organization, and we're very grateful for people who help to support the work that we do. We're supporting over 1,000 people who are living with ALS in the province of Ontario, and then helping to support the 3,000 Canadians, making sure that they get that access to therapies as we look forward. And then as we think about COVID, the reality is a large part of our fundraising does come from events, and obviously not being able to gather in person has had a direct impact on that. So things like our walk to end ALS, which normally we would have had 30 events in Ontario, we had to pivot, and in 83 days, we moved it from being 30 events happening from April through to September to one event on Global ALS Awareness Day, where we had hoped to raise $2.1 million. We've been very successful in raising 1.26, but you can appreciate that that is a great shortfall from what we had needed to be able to make those important investments in research and also to support the client services that are so vital to our community. So that gives you just a bit of background, and I know that James has a lot to share as well.
So Bullying Canada was founded in 2006. It helps bring an end to the soul-crushing torment that bullied kids suffer. Bullying Canada is Canada's only national organization that resolves bullying situations by directly facilitating communication between bullied kids, their tormentors, parents, teachers, school boards, social services, and when necessary, even police. Our unique service provides 24/7, 365-day-a-year national support team, staffed by 350 highly trained responders from across the country, who communicate with bullied youth by phone, online chat, email, and texting. Our one-on-one counseling lasts for as long as it takes to bring an end to the bullying, days, weeks, or even months. Last year, we answered 125,255 cries for help, and this year, the number of kids reaching out is already outpacing last year. Obviously, this year has been hard on everyone, but it's been incredibly hard on kids, many of whom suffer from depression brought about by the forced isolation from friends and extended family. So when they're bullied, their stress is exponentially multiplied. Well, if bullying is prolonged, kids are now more likely to consider taking their own lives, which breaks our hearts. Our responders are trained in suicide prevention and specific ways that Bullying Canada has developed over our more than a decade of public service to work with bullied children and their families, the bullies and their families, and their school teachers, principals, guidance counselors, who all form a protective ring around each bullied child as we negotiate a way to end the bullying for those who depend on us for help. When schools were closed earlier this year, thousands of Canadian youths were bullied on social media or through phone calls, texts, and emails. Sadly, being kept home didn't keep kids from being badly bullied. Cyberbullying reached all-time highs. But I think the best way to illustrate this issue and the crucial role Bullying Canada plays is to share a story in the words of one of the kids that reached out for help. Earlier this year, when my high school was still open, my life was hell. 2 bullies wouldn't leave me alone. At school, these kids shoved or tripped me. They told me I was stupid, worthless, ugly, and unlovable. Eventually, I believed them. They pushed me down a flight of stairs and I sprained my wrist. A couple of days later, they grabbed an art assignment that I had worked on for a week and ripped it up. They started a rumor that I cheated on tests, so other kids started hating on me too. When my school was closed indefinitely because of COVID-19, I was thrilled. I thought my bullying would end, but then it didn't. These bullies started texting insults to me. On my Instagram feed, they posted embarrassing comments about me for all my friends to see. They emailed death threats to me. I felt sick all the time and couldn't sleep. I lost all hope of living a happy life. But then I Googled bullying help, and Bullying Canada popped up. I texted them, and a support worker named Sue let me pour out my heart to her. She told me that she had been bullied before too. I could tell she really got me. Right away, she understood how my life had become a living nightmare. Sue and I had many heartfelt chats over the next few days. Because Sue asked, I told her who my bullies were. And then she actually called their parents and talked to both bullies. I couldn't believe someone would do this for me. Sue helped the bullies understand what they were doing to me and how hurtful it was. She coached their parents on how to talk to their kids. And I was shocked when both kids called to apologize to me. And then they stopped being mean to me. Sue found a local counselor for me, and those chats are helping a lot. I'm sleeping and eating well again, and I know I'm a good person, and I know what happy feels like again. This was in Erica's words, and this is just one example of the thousands and thousands of children who reach out to Bullying Canada in desperate need of support.
Thanks, James. So, question for both of you. What does your donor base look like normally?
Generally, the bulk, if not all of our funding is provided by individuals, and typically they're 40 to 50 plus years of age, and mostly in regards to our direct mail outreach.
And at ALS Canada, the majority of our donors would be family members or loved ones, somebody within the network of someone who has received that diagnosis. And you can appreciate that as 1,000 Canadians will be diagnosed in this coming year, about the same number of people will pass away. But the reality is, because ALS is such a harsh and cruel disease, often people, once their loved one has passed, they simply are done because it's completely challenging for the family and what it is that they face.
So after COVID, how do you see your fundraising changing? Tammy?
So I think that there will be a lot of silver linings and learnings that we will take out of COVID. And so as we made that very quick pivot to be able to be a virtual event, we have seen some success as a result. And I can see that there is a potential that we will do a hybrid of virtual and in person in the future. It also, for our community, is actually an important access point, because you can appreciate that with mobility being challenged, that the ability to connect through technology could be a help for people who are affected by ALS. So we think that that will be a difference. And we also have seen some great opportunities in events like this, where we've been able to connect a bit differently with our donors and with another community base that we wouldn't otherwise have. So we see those as opportunities for the future.
For us, it will change. We're doing more and more virtual events, and people are kind of opening up to them, which is helping a little bit with attracting younger donors. As far as the overall landscape, it does look a little bit rough. There's some studies that show it's going to take a few years for giving to return to prior levels.
So I'm going to open the floor now for questions, and I know Jenna has one.
Thanks, Elke, for organizing this, and thank you to both Tammy and James for sharing your stories. I have questions for each of you. Tammy, specifically to the Ice Bucket Challenge, there's been some reports lately in the news about use of proceeds and how the Ice Bucket Challenge has scaled ALS and the service delivery. So maybe you could speak to how those funds were used and where it's taken you now.
Thank you very much for your question, Jenna. It's interesting you bring up Ice Bucket Challenge, because as much as we are in a crisis now, that actually was a crisis. Although I would take that one any day over a COVID crisis. It was a positive crisis. And it was curious because I had actually just stepped off of the board. I'd actually joined the board of ALS Canada the same week as my cousin's funeral. And a year later, almost to the day, our CEO announced she was leaving, and I was coming from private equity. So I had said to the board, well, if you need somebody, I can step in and keep the wheels on the bus until we can hire someone else. And it was very quickly evident to me that I might be able to contribute differently. And that was actually in May 2014. And as you will recall, the Ice Bucket Challenge really hit on August 8th, 2014. And with my connection back to Boston from my cousin, I actually was tagged quite early on with it. And I actually have enormously curly hair normally. So it took me a while to do the Ice Bucket Challenge because I had a really great blowout that day. But eventually we did, and we got on board, and we got on board quickly. And with a communications background, said, you know what? If you want to support Canadians living with ALS and you want to make investments in ALS research, then support ALS Canada at als.ca. And we made it happen. And we worked with the partners across the country. And so collectively, Canadians actually raised more per capita than any other country globally. And we were able to raise $17.2 million within very short period of time. So from August until December, we raised $17.2 million by Canadians. But in that time, we immediately actually were able to make a connection to Brain Canada. I'd had a get together with the CEO on August 6th, and by November 19th, we actually had signed an agreement to match $10 million of what we raised to be able to invest in ALS research. So we turned that $17 million into $27 million, and we put, of that, 21.5 million of it out into research within the next 3 years. These were some of the largest grants that we had ever been able to do, and they were transformational. They were truly translational, where we take it from bench, meaning basic research, where we're understanding the disease, and looked at how we could get it into clinical trials and out to patients and in their hands. So we were able to do a lot with it to start. And then with the remaining funds, those were distributed across the country to each of the provincial societies based upon what came in from their province. And in Ontario, which is where we have our responsibility, we've been able to continue to make those investments work for us. So making foundational investments in our organization, and also doing seed funding for projects, like investing in more regional managers so that we had more people on the ground in communities being able to deliver even better support, which itself then becomes self-generating, because when people receive better support, then they want to support further. And so we've been able to continue to utilize those funds in that way, and in fact replace the Ice Bucket Challenge funds with other donor funds. So there's been a lot that we've been able to do, and it's one of the reasons that we are able to weather the COVID storm as well as we have been.
So I think everybody's under the impression that the loathed 2020 is coming to an end. Can you find something good that happened in 2020 for your organizations, James?
Well, we've seen more and more people reach out, right? And that sounds like it's maybe a barometer of bad things happening, but it's also that they're willing to reach out and that they know they need help and they know where to find help and whatnot. So there is a little bit of a silver lining in there, because there's Statistics Canada says something like 47% of parents report youth that are victims of bullying. And those are just the reported ones, and it's, you know, most likely higher. So we are finding ways to step in and engage with these people to help alleviate those problems. So even though overall, especially like financially and whatnot, this has not been a great year, we are seeing more ability to affect change for these people in their lives.
Wonderful. Well, James and Tammy, thank you so much for spending the time, making the time in such a busy day. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're hoping this will be one of many. As we know, ALS doesn't care if you're Canadian or from the Punjab or from wherever you can be. It doesn't respect citizenship, as the cases with bullying. So both fantastic causes. Thank you so much for bringing your organizations to light, and for everything you do. We know the charitable sector is not a profitable sector. It's not where you make the money, but it's where the need is. So thank you everyone for making the time. You have the link. Any donation is welcome. $5, we'll take them. Well, they'll take them. And again, if you have any other cause that you want to be a part of, or Rubach Wealth Living Room Giving, by all means, reach out to us. We're here, and let's make it a better place.